Hey, good morning, friends. I wanted to encourage you this morning from the Gospel of John, uh, chapter number 13. In John chapter 13, this chapter 13, 14, 15, he's preparing to go to the cross. These are the last few hours, day of his ministry, and he was really preparing the disciples for what was to come. And he had spent the better part of the last 3 years demonstrating love in action. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is because we live in this tumultuous time, and where anger and bitterness and fear seem to be captivating so many people. And I wanted you and I to be reminded that as Christians, we live with a different worldview, a different paradigm. Jesus, had revealed to them and the world the love of the Father. It wasn't just an emotional sentimentality, but love in action. The Greek word agape, for the selfless, sacrificial giving of oneself for the benefit of others. And he demonstrated that, proved that love for us on the cross. Let me read for you verse 34 and 35. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. So he starts this speaking to the disciples. He's already washed the feet of the disciples. They celebrated the Passover. He's foretold what's going to come, and they're really at a place of feeling perplexed and not quite understanding what he's trying to get across to them. And so he has just a few more moments, precious moments to spend with them. And I think he's telling them, hey, this is the important thing. I need you to get this. And he phrases it like this. He goes, a new commandment. Now, if he says it's a commandment, then we should understand that it's not optional. The God who is love sent his Son to demonstrate that love, that his love might be poured into our hearts and flow through us. He calls us to love one another. And so if we're going to love one another, we need to cease from seeing ourselves as independent entities, where we live for ourselves, where we do what's in our best interest, where we serve ourselves. Because love, and God shows us as love, gives of itself sacrificially for the benefit of others. And so he says, love one another, and not just generic. He says, as I have loved you. Friends, how does he love you? How does he love me? Well, the undeniable evidence of his love for us is the cross, that he laid down his life for his friends. He says, I have loved you. And now the question for you and I is, are we going to allow his love to flow freely through us? This commandment, would be impossible if he didn't live in us. But his commandments become a promise because he put his life in us. We saw before where he poured his love into us through his Spirit. And so even though we might find it challenging to love others, do you think it wasn't challenging? I mean, we weren't at our best when God loved us. The scripture says when we were his enemies, he loved us. And so we allow Christ to love through us. So just moment by moment and day by day, for the people that are friendly and the people that irritate us, we say, Lord, I want to be an instrument in which you can express your love. He says you are to love one another. Then in verse 35, he says, by this, all people will know that you are my disciple if you have love one for another. So the distinctive of a disciple of Jesus is so different than what many people see in religious people. The distinctive is love. We can have all kinds of ideas, all kinds of other distinctives, and miss the point if the distinctive isn't love. Even in the book of Revelation, he says to the church in rebuke, he said, you've left your first love. And so if as a people, as Christians, as disciples of Jesus, as the church, if we're not known for love, there's something very wrong. We need to reorient ourselves and maybe realize that all of our arguing and deciding who's right and who's wrong misses the point, but that Jesus came to love through us, and that the unbelieving world should be looking in on the believing world and see, man, there's something different about those people. They love one another. That's what he's called us to be. And so we should ask ourselves, and maybe in a little bit of meditative prayer, what am I known for? If my spouse, if my children, if my neighbors, my co-workers were given one adjective to describe my life, which adjective would they choose? And then we need to say, well, I want to live in such a way of surrendered obedience to the indwelling life of Christ that people would begin to see and experience the love of God through me. The Apostle Paul says it in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1 and 2 like this. He says, therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love, as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. So friends, when we think about this idea of imitating, it's really not about something we do in our own power or our own strength, but us allowing his life in us to be manifest through us, because we are his beloved children. And we know that as his beloved children, we are to walk in love. His love for us, and then allowing his love for us to live through us as we love one another, as we love our enemies. And it says, and he gave himself up for us, so that we need to be willing and ready to see that we're called not to live independent of others, but interdependent lives. We give ourselves up for others. Our lives are to be a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. Well, I hope this blesses you and encourages you. And if it does, please send it on to someone else. And I'll hope to see you soon. God bless.